Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're Masech the Succah Daf Lamed Daled. We are going to begin on Lamed Gimel Amid Beis by the Mishnah. A Rabbi, so we started off learning about the Lulav, we mentioned about Hadas, now we're learning about the Rabbi. A Rabbi Gezula V'Yavesha Psula. Same as the Lulav and the Hadas, if it's stolen or it's dry, the Mishnah says it's puzzle. And Rashi says, because lulav delachem akul koi. Very interesting. Why it only mentions it here, but not by the hadas. That says that when it says lachem, it's referring to all of the arba minim. Shel shevish onidachas psul, as we mentioned before, when it comes to not just regular avodah zarah, which we would say b'diavad you could use because mitzvahs l'avahenois, but this is something which doesn't have the shear because it's supposed to be burned. Nikdam Rosha, similarly as we mentioned before, to cut the tip of the arava. Nifritzu Oleha, and let's say the leaves came completely separated from its core. The Hasasafa Psul. Now this is different. It says that the Sasafa, we'll discuss exactly what this is. It has certain similarities to the willow, but it's not, and therefore it's possible. Kamusha, let's say it's almost dried. V'nishru mixas oleha, some of the leaves remain. V'shel bal shera, or if it comes from bal, which we'll call from a field. Rashi says gedila besada shelo al hanachal. So it's not by the stream, by the nachal, but it's just growing in a field. We're going to see the reason why, but the din is it is kosher. Rashi also explains Baal, because we learned in Cheskas Abatim, in the Chavches range in Baba Basra, that Karka She'en Tzricha Lahashkais. It's referring to Beis Baal is land that does not need to be watered. The Sagle B'Mutter B'Shemayim, and it's enough for the rain of the heavens to come down. That's typically what a Baal is. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Tanubam. Arvi Nachal. When the pasuk says "Al-Kach lachem b'yom rishon pri hader kapos tamarim and af eitz avos," then it mentions Arvi Nachal, which, by the way, we can understand based on the pasuk why it mentions "Al-Kach lachem b'yom rishon." It mentions, we learned about the lulav because it says, of course, it says pri hader. It's not connected because we learned about eged, so we want to learn about the lulav first. It's also the largest, so it says kapos tamarim, and then it says. Anafetz avos, which is the hadas, which is why that's the next thing. And now Arvi Nachal is the last mentioned in the pasuk, so that's why it's the next Mishnah. That's the significance of its order. So Arvi Nachal means Hagdilan al Hanachal. It has to be that actually grew by the river. Rashi says Nachli Mayim Mitzmazu Umihu Shel Bal Sheira. We'll see why. Davar Acher Arvi Nachal. That its leaves are very long, comparable to that of a river, a long river. So if you think of a willow as opposed to hadassim, the leaves are comparable to the eyes. The rava, as we say, is comparable to the mouth. It's very long, so it's mashach kanachal. Tan idach arvinachal ainli el arvinachal. Why pasuk could just be talking about Dav Arvi Nachal. Shalbal v'shal harim anayin talomer arvei nachal mikol makvei. The fact that it's written in this language comes to include everything. So it's a lashon of rabbim. It's more inclusive, and therefore, even if it doesn't grow necessarily by the nachal, even though it says arvei, the aravos of the nachal, since it has arvei nachal, that comes to include these other things that we mentioned. Lamed Daled Manal. Avashol Omer Arvei, the fact that it's written in a poor language is not coming to tell you that Shalbal is kosher. Rather, it's telling you that Shtayim, that there's two mitzvos which are connected to the arava. Achas lulav, achas l'mikdash. One is the lulav as we know it, and also in the mikdash, as we'll see later on in the fourth parak of Lulav Rav on Daf Mem Hey, that there's a mitzvah hakavis mizbech, to surround the mizbech with the arava. We'll discuss that again in about 10 blocks from now. Fine. Rabbanan l'mikdash manolu. So according to the Rabbanan, Rabbi Nachal is not coming to tell you this notion of bringing arabos to the mikdash. So the question is, how do they know? How do they know this din? It is true that it's done, but you can't. They don't learn out from Rabbi Nachal because Rabbi Nachal they already learned to come to include shalbal, etc. So Hilchos Gemir, according to them, it's actually the dinim of a rabba in the mikdash is a halacha Moshe Sinai. Yom Rav Asi, Yom Rav Yochanan, Es Netios, Arom Nisachamayim, halacha Moshe Sinai. So when it comes to these three dinim, it's a halacha Moshe Sinai. So a rava, which is what we established already, is referring to the situation where again it's surrounded by the mizbeach or it's put against the mizbeach. Nisachamayim, the water libations that are done specifically on the holiday of Sukkot. That's halacha Moshe Sinai, and one which is a little more complex is the din of aser netios, 10 trees. So Rashi says as follows, and quoting Succah Shvius in the first parak, says aser netios hamafuzaros. If you have 10 trees that are spread apart, the sok base saw within a measurement of a base saw, she'en bein zu zu el kamashish bein zu. They're exactly each of them are exactly spread apart the exact same amount. But tafsu beis saw shu nun ama al nun ama. It occupies a saw which is 50 by 50 amos. Beis Sosayim is 50 by 100, which, as we've seen in many places in Sukkah Shabbos, is the dimensions of the mikdash of 100 by 50. Mefuzaros l'orich v'reicha b'shava. So they're spread out equally against square, 50 by 50. So Charshin Kol Beis Saw B'Shvilan Erev Shvius Ad Rosh Hashanah. You're allowed to plow in that area from Erev Shvius all the way until Rosh Hashanah. Afal Pisha Mitzvah Min HaTorah L'Chaisim L'Chayil L'Kodesh. Really, there's an inyan when it comes to Shvius. They're supposed to not just go to the last second. You're supposed to add on to it. However, and it brings Gemara continues there. However, when it comes to this din of the Esnetios, we say the din is halacha Moshe Sinai, sheyankas be'esasiya kula umuta lichorish es kulan b'shvilan, that you're allowed to continue to plow all the way up until that last moment of Rosh Hashanah. So again, it's halacha Moshe Sinai, a special dispensation for these case of the Eser Netios. It's a lengthy Rashi, but that's the basic idea. Tanobanan. Rabbi Nachal, what do we learn out from this pasuk? Hagdilois al hanachal. It means that it grows by this nachal, by the river, by the stream. Prat l'safsafa hagdila ben harim. The safsafa is not acceptable. It grows by the mountains. Amar Rav Zera Mikra. What pasuk substantiates this notion? So the pasuk says, "Kach al mayim rabim sasva shemoy." Amar le'abaya v'dilma perushi kamafarish. Maybe the pasuk is going to explain it. Kach al mayim rabim. You should take it by something which grows by many waters. Remind you sasva. Maybe it's saying you could take the sasva. Nimkin ma shemoy. Why does it mention that last word, which kind of throws you off? That doesn't seem to have any additional significance, and therefore it's coming to tell you not Prushika Mafarish, but rather it's telling that this is what is not allowed to be taken. Amar Rabbi Yomar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Ani Amarti Shu Yisrael Lefanai Kikashol Al Mayim Rabim. I considered you just like a tree that was growing by many waters, my Nihu Arava. However, you made yourself not like that. You made yourself samoy like the sasva, which grows by the mountains. Some people read it a little bit differently. Fine. So maybe it's acceptable and it's telling you that you could take it. Again, it says that that you did something against that which is like the arava. I thought you would be just like the arava. You acted like the sasva on the mountains. Okay, and therefore, based on this drasha, based on this pasuk, this is not something in which is allowed to be done. You cannot take the sasva as an arava for the mitzvah of arava. Of course, we have to now define what is a sasva. So if you look at it, if it looks exactly like the arava, how are you going to know which one's kosher, which one's possible? So there's actually a few different distinctions. Taraban, ezu arava, ezu sasva. So arava, when it comes to the willow, kanashala adoin, its stem is red, but olashalam moshoich, as we mentioned, its leaves are long, upia cholik. However, its edges are smooth; they're not jagged edges. Sasva kanashalalavan. However, when it comes to the stem of the sasva, it's white. The olashala agoil, and it's more rounded. Its leaves upia daimulamago, and its edges are comparable to that of a sickle. So therefore, this again, because of the way it looks, it's lamago. It's pointy and sticky. And it's not something which is smooth, and that's how you'll be able to distinguish again between the colors and the way that it's shaped and whether it's smooth. Tanya daimul lamago kosher, daimul lamaser posel. If it's daima to a sickle, it's kosher. It's only if it's daimul lamaser to a saw, it's posel. So how can you tell me that it's not good? That this is not good? So Rabbi Kitanyahi bechilfa gila. We're talking about a chilfa gila. So the gila willow, according to this, is kosher because each actually has two edges. So if it has two edges, then it's okay. However, if it's just it's a lamago, then it's just one edge, so that is a problem. So according to this shita, b'chilfa gila, according to the way of Rashi reading this, let's find this Rashi. Second wide line, L'gors mishkach l'chilfa gila min arava ksherihi, v'pia dam l'mago, av l'shar arava pia chalok. Chilfa arvasa, lav hainu chilfa gila el asasa, v'achshav nishtanis mishma v'karin la arava. Okay, fine. Now the next piece of Gemara is a Gemara in the end of, I think, the third parak of Masechta Shabbos. Amar Rav Chisda, Hani Tlasa. Let's go back. Kitan here b'chilfa gila. So Amar Rabbi, Shma mina hay chilfa gila kashel hayshana. We're saying that this chilfa gila is acceptable. Zepshita madatema however islay shem levaya l'niskasha kamashmon, because it has this additional name. Maybe it would be not acceptable. Kamashmon ve'ema hakanami avinachol marachman mikomakim. We said that's more inclusive. It's interesting. The pshita should be, well, maybe you would think it's daimul lamaser, right? It's daimul lamago, right? So it's not so pashut. So we're saying it's because of, again, the fact that it has an additional name. Amar Rav Chisda, Hani tlas mili ishtani shemayu. There's three things that we changed its name. V'chichar beis mikdash, when the beis mikdash was destroyed. And therefore, because the name was changed, you still have to remember what one is good, one's bad, but the name changed, but the thing itself is the same. So we can get confused. Chalapte arvasa chalapta. My nafkamina. So we changed the names. However, we have to be careful to make sure that we're using the proper arava for sukkahs. Shipura chatzraista shipuira. Literally, one's a trumpet, one's a shofar. My nafkamina is shofar Rosh Hashanah. Only one is proper to be used for the shofar Rosh Hashanah. Pasorta psora pasaira pasor pasorta. My nafkamina mekach memchar. These are these different types of tables in which transactions take place. Rashi says achas kedai achas katana. One was big and one was small. M'shem hayu regin likrois v'gedoyla chalv katana v'shel katana gedoyla. So again, it has to do with business transactions. Amar Baya afani Amar beikasi havlila beikasi. These are two different stomachs. If a person found a needle in the base of kaisais, in one of the stomachs, so the din is whether or not that is a din of a treifa. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Besa kosos, sofa keres, who also koiva, it's like a hat, like a kois, like a cup. The dafnu saviv, loy ava kishnei defanois, the tanya chulin, we learn in Masechtas Chulin, machat shenimsus ba'oivi besa koisos, if you find a needle in the basic kosos, mitzad echad, techuva ba'avyav, v'onikav nekem mafulish kosher. If it's only on one side, which means it didn't go completely through, it's kosher. She'oivi sosmoi, because its thickness closed it. Umagin, and therefore protects it. It protects it, and therefore it's kosher. Mishnei stadim, however, let's say it went straight through, shenekim a foolish treifa. U'ba'oisa shekarin achshav basic kosos, ein chiluk. That which we now call basic kosos, there's no difference. L'hachsher, and you should dive no dak, because its walls are thin. Hu ha'yiragil likros. So again, the question is that the time we make a distinction between it going through one side and not both sides, whether it's kosher or treifa, is dafka by one of these two names. So that's why you have to know which one is correct. Amar Rabba Bar Yosef Afani Omer Bubble Bortzav Bubble. My nafkamin as we continue to Lamadal Mabez. Why do we need to know these two different names of what Babylonia is? So Legite Noshim, and on this there's actually two pshatim. Look in Rashi on the very top of Lamed Daled Mabez. The Kaimelon we paskin at the very beginning of Masechtas Gittin. Hamevi get mechutz la'aretz. If a person brings a get from outside of Eretz Yisrael, we know that a person has to make this declaration that before me was written, before me was signed. Famous machlokes Rabbi and Rabba, whether it's because they're not experts in the dinim of Lishma outside of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you have to establish that you know for sure this get belonged to this man and he's giving it dafka to his wife because the cost of love has to be Lishma, or it's because there's no Eidim, because of the lack of caravans. But maybe Eretz Yisrael in Sarach, says Rashi. However, let's say you bring it from Eretz Yisrael, so in that situation, you don't need to do anything. Lafi should be keen Lishma, because Eretz Yisrael they know the dinim of Lishma. But oil regalim mitzuyin l'hakar chasimas eidim l'kaima. And people are constantly traveling to get to Eretz Yisrael because they used to travel there for the Shosh Regalim, and therefore because of that, there was always witnesses available. And it says over there, Ramin and Hassan on Daf Vav in Masechtas Gittin, Babel to Eretz Yisrael. The dinim of Babel is just like Eretz Yisrael, which means L'gin, v'shehein b'nei Torah. First of all, they're experts in Torah in Babel. V'bikin l'shma. V'bnei yeshiva matzuyin leilach v'lima m'shem Torah mikom m'kamos. They used to constantly go back and forth. However, Bortziv samach Babel ain't b'nei Torah. The people in Bortziv were not b'nei Torah, and therefore the dinim of having to say b'fanei would not apply. Would be required because they're not experts. Fine. A hilkach maybe mebavel sarach shiyamur or bortzav in sarach. So that's because bortzav is really bubble. So in bubble you do have to say b'fanei nechtam. In bortzav you don't. Right there, next mishnah. When it comes to the requirement of what you need for the arba minim, we take 3 hadassim, which of course we know, 2 aravos, 1 lulav, and 1 esrog. However, this is what the difference is. Afilu shnaim kutumim v'echad enu katum. Even if 2 of the hadassim are cut off, as long as one of them is not katum, then it's acceptable. All you need to have is 1 that's not katum. Afilu shloshim kutumim. Even if all 3 of the hadassim are cut off, it's still acceptable, which is stickle difficult because it seems to go directly against our Mishnah that we said before. Okay. Rabbi Kiva Omer Kashem Shulu of Echad V'Esrog Echad Kachadas Echad B'Rava Achas. Interesting sheet of Rabbi Kiva that you don't actually need to take 3 hadassim to a ravos. Just take 1, 1, 1, and 1. That's it. Which seems to be very logical. That's what you should do. Tanya. So let's see the Gemara. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Prietz Hadar Echad. Take 1 esrog. Kapus Tamarim Echad. Take 1 lulav. Anaf Eitz Avos. Now the fact that it says Anaf Eitz Avos, and Avos is Lashon Rabim, so therefore you take Shloisha. Arvei Nachal Shtayim. Some people read it because the pasuk says Anaf 8 avos, that's 3, and then Armi Nachos 2. Fil Shnaim Ketumim ve'echad sheinu kotum. Rav Tarfon Omer Shloisha v'fil Shloshten Ketumim. Even all 3 are cut off. Rabbi Kiva Omer Kashem Shulav Echad Esrog Echad Kachadas Echad B'Rava Achas. Omer Rabbi Lezer Yochel Yehi Esrog Imahen. You would think, and this is a very important piece of Gemara, which is going to answer a very difficult question about the order of all these Mishnayos. Yochel Yehi Esrog Imahen. You would think that the Esrog should be tied up together by Aguda Achas. Amr v'chi nemer pri other vik kapos tamarim, v'lo nemer elo kapos. It doesn't say vik. So since it doesn't have pri other vik kapos tamarim, the fact that it's missing that vav shows that the esrog is supposed to be separately. So you put the 3 together, the lulav, the hadas, and the rava, you separate the esrog from those 3 things, which explains beautifully, as we're going to see in tomorrow's daf. We're going to stop by this next Mishnah. It talks about the din of an esrog. Esrog, hagozel, vayavish pasel. Question is, why did where we decided this mishnayos lulav? We explained why it's lulav, hadas, and a rava, because that's the order. But why do we have this mishnah completely separating those 3 from this one? That's based on this group of this Gemara. That's based and tied to this mishnah. That this mishnah is coming to tell you that the esrog is supposed to be separate, because it doesn't say u kapos, and since it doesn't say it that way, so when we're reciting the mishnayos, we dafka separated the esrog, and as opposed to the other 3, which are all directly connected and written right next to each other. How do we know if you don't have one of the arba minimums ma'akim? Talmud Lomer u'kachtem shnei lukichatam has to be complete. Rishmul manashach ishleimin, if they have to be complete, so boy nami cool. All 3 of the hadasim are now to be kotel. Ilo boy shleimin afil achad nami loy. Then if it doesn't have to be shleimin, so why does one even have to be cut remain? So Amr B'Yir Amr Rav Ami Chazer Rabbi Shmuel. In fact, you're right. Rabbi Shmuel was chazer on this statement, and he says you're right. It doesn't make sense that you should have to have 2 kotum. 2 could be kotum, but 1 not kotum. Like Reb Tarfon, I feel shoshin ketumin is acceptable. Amr Yehuda Amr Shmuel halachic Reb Tarfon, that even if the hadasim are kotum, for whatever reason, it's still fine. And if you look in Rashi over here, but the last Rashi by the Mishnah, Reb Tarfon Amr I feel shoshin ketumin, the little boy hadar b'hadas. For some reason, hadar is not required by the hadas. Yosef Shmuel Taimi, the Amr Hu Shmuel lahanu. The Mizavni Asa Ashavi Zivinu, regarding these people that would sell the Hadassim, that you would be able to have the prices be brought down. He said you should bring them down. If you don't lower the prices of Hadassim, I'm going to pass like Rav Tarfon, that requires that even though there's 3 Hadassim, but they can be kotel. So my time is because he was very lenient. Rabbi Kiva says you only need to have one hadas. Isn't that even more makel? So you should threaten them to be makel like Rabbi Kiva. The truth is Rabbi Kiva is not more makel. What do you mean? He says only 1. He says 3. He says 3 which are cut. That is something which is easy to find. But even to find 1 which is not cut, that is something which is harder to find. Okay. We're going to stop there, actually, because we'll see the Mishnah and all the Gemara on that next time. Let's see a couple questions. Question 1. So we said according to one shita, a rava, which has to do with the mikdash, is halakha Moshe Sinai, or it could be based on the pasuk of Nachal, and also because the dinim of Visuch HaMayim. Question 2. Minolan, from where we know the lulav hadas and rav nital beguda achas esrog nifrud mehen, because it says in the pasuk hatam rishon creates other kapos tamarim. This is the u kapos tamarim, and therefore it comes to tell you that the esrog is not supposed to be attached with everything else. Okay, let's see a couple more questions here. TA 14. Mahim simani safsafa. What are the simanim to show that a safsafa is not kosher? So the 3 are First of all, kana lavan, we said the stem is white. Ola ogle, that's round, its leaves. And pia kamagal, and its edge is comparable to that of a sickle. TB 15. Is a psul haposel b'lulav arava hakilu b'achshir b'hadas. Not sure why I got this question wrong. What is the psul of a lulav and a rava that we're making when it comes to hadas? Nikdam roisho, that if it's cut off the top, we say in this Mishnah, like the Shita Rav Tarfon, even if all three are cut off, it's still kosher. Adkan.